Good evening and welcome to October's Equipped Live. My name is Jackie. I'll be walking you through the program. I have the pleasure of asking Greg the questions. Greg has the honor, pleasure, privilege of answering the questions. I'm not sure, but Greg, welcome.
Welcome.
All right, so our next event will be on November 17th. I'll send a notice out about that. And starting today, actually, we started putting notes in UKG as well, so people can check their communications talk area of UKG and see these updates as well. So, Greg, first question. This was submitted by Luke Zaborny, and there's a little bit of background to this, so I'm going to read what he submitted. And he says he's had the privilege of seeing you outside of work at various events from a young age to present. I think he means his young age to present. And he's noticed something interesting about how you interact with people. He says you seem to listen closely and engage in conversations that help you understand others' competencies, often without asking direct questions. He said it feels like a subtle way of guiding the conversation to gauge whether someone might be a good fit for opportunities in the IFMC. So if that's truly your approach, he's curious, do you apply this method regardless of age? And then he says, in sports, for example, it's common for team owners to identify talent early, even in kids who are too young to compete, because they recognize potential and want to ensure those individuals are brought on into the fold when the time is right. And so he's just wondering, what's your approach on all of that? Is his observation correct? And kind of your thoughts on that whole area.
Well, that is a neat observation, and I'm honored that he's paying attention. And was paying attention at an early age. I think it really starts out with I'm kind of naturally curious, and of course we've talked a lot about the hedgehog concept, and I find that really, really interesting to just understand where people's hedgehog is. So, what are they passionate about? What do they think they're really good at? What are the economic opportunities? Is that all aligned? And I go at that using a method that's called Socratic questioning, and that really it helps me learn because I'm more aware of things. If I'm asking questions and I'm getting answers, I'm learning as that's happening. But in a lot of cases, those questions trigger thought by the person that's doing the talking, and recognition that, gee, I didn't think of it that way. And so there's learning on both sides, and that's really the power of Socratic questioning. And in the process, of course, people like to talk about themselves. They like when somebody pays attention to them, and so that tends to build relationships. And it's kind of comical, and Jan has even commented on this. uh, I'll be in a conversation with someone, I won't say anything other than ask questions, and at the end of it they'll say, man, this is a great conversation. And Jan will walk away and Jan will say, you didn't say anything. You just asked questions. But that's the power of Socratic questioning. And Socratic comes from Socrates, so that method has been around for a long time, and it's very powerful.
I have also observed this in you. Is there anything that having natural curiosity about you that has, like, how has that helped lead to your success and the success of the companies?
Oh, I think learning because of the questioning, but that uncovers a lot of opportunity. And most often it uncovers more opportunity than there's hours in the day to take advantage of. And so I think that's been a key to some of our growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. So I have several questions that I actually put on the list, but just a note to everybody who's listening, we are still taking questions from others. This doesn't have to become the Jackie question show, but I'm going to ask a couple that I threw on the list here. So the first one is, what inspired you to start the ESI Hall of Fame event? or Hall of Fame recognition, not just event?
Just appreciation for the folks that have been with us for decades. And Deb and I had talked quite a bit over the years about how do we say thanks to those folks, and how do we really recognize what they've done? And I've talked to Matt about that occasionally as well. But you know, Deb and I have, as we're getting closer to the end of our careers, we think about that stuff. Of gee, we wouldn't be where we're at if it wasn't for really everybody on the team, but in large part the folks that have been around for close to 4 decades. And so we were thinking about that, really didn't come up with anything that caused us to say, wow, that's really a neat idea, until a small group of us were touring Hytrol Conveyor. And in the plant at Hytrol, they had plaques on the wall for folks that had more than 40 years of service. And boy, the minute I saw that, that there was a little epiphany there of, wow, that's a really neat idea. And so then after that, there were a number of conversations with a number of key folks in the organization, and we ultimately settled on the Hall of Fame and having that event annually.
Was there any specific reason that you went with 35 years?
40, the group was smaller. And so as we looked at what's reasonable here, 35 just seemed like the right number. There wasn't really any specific reason for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a really neat thing that you guys do, and it's fun to see people as they get inducted into that. So next question I also submitted is, these Equipped Live episodes have really been received positively by folks in the IFMC, and they seem to be of value to team members of ESI clients. But what is it that you really hope to achieve through these Equipped Live sessions?
I think it's a great opportunity for me to hear questions from people, so I get a feel for what they're thinking, what they're interested in. And I think it's a great opportunity to explain why the IFMC is the way it is, and really help with the understanding, help tie the day-to-day actions into the visions and the strategies for the IFMC and for different business units. And there, in the military, there's a thing called commander's intent. And what that recognizes is that if the commander in the military, and that's not the way I try to do things here, but if the commander makes the vision and the strategy very clear, then once the first shots are fired in a war, people know what to do. They can improvise, they understand what that intent is, and in other words, what the strategy is, and they improvise, and the folks that do the best at that obviously win. And so winning in my book is bigger bonuses. So if we if I have a chance to maybe explain the vision and the strategy better, connect that to day-to-day life, the world is changing at an ever increasing pace, and so people need to adapt. They need to keep moving us in the right direction without daily interaction.
I think that might spur some additional questions from folks that are listening, is let's learn more about that vision and strategy. I think that there could be some really great questions out there about that. So I'm going to throw this question in there because now I'm just curious. Is there any question that you're surprised has not been asked yet? Or maybe you can think about this and get back to us at the next one.
No, there's nothing that I had hoped for. I'm just doing kind of what I normally do. I'm just curious, what are people interested in?
And I would ask if there's a question you don't want someone to ask, but I don't want you to say it because I know someone will ask it then. So we'll just leave that alone.
I'm not even worried about that. I mean, I know how to say, you know what, I'm not going to answer.
Right. And that's good. So another question then, also a question of mine. What is the most rewarding thing to you about being a business owner?
I, what really, and it wasn't always this way, but because of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when I was just a kid on the farm growing up, really with pretty modest means. Of course, I was lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so I was, excuse me, I was more interested in the financial rewards. Uh, but anymore, the thing that really is pleasing to me is to see people growing and thriving using the IFMC values. And that that's just really, really rewarding and really satisfying. One of the things that happened around the time I got in a motorcycle accident and fractured my neck is that really that that was kind of a reset for me. I thought about a lot of things I hadn't thought about before, and one of them was, what do I want on what epitaph do I want on my headstone? And essentially, the choice I made there was simple. It's just he left the world better than he found it. And so every day, that's kind of what I'm striving to do. And of course, bonus is the kind of the measure of how well the team members are doing. And when that's happening and things are growing, that's kind of a metric that tells me, okay, maybe it's working.
So you mentioned another time before that kind of changed your perspective on things was when there was a strike with the companies. Was the motorcycle accident before or after that?
After.
So the strike happened, changed your perspective, then the motorcycle accident, and it continued to change and shift and evolve the way you thought. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good question, Jackie. With the strike, that was really that the recognition there was the value of other people's input. And actually that probably is when I started behaving a little bit more like Luke was describing in the first question. And but that was a major change. I was pretty arrogant, pretty I wouldn't have worked for myself.
That's admirable when people can get to that point where they can admit that and recognize, how they need to change. So I like that. We've got a couple questions left, but I don't want to ask any of them because I think the answers are longer than we really have time for. So that being said, is there anything that you'd like to add to the conversation? Any message you'd like to send to the folks that watch this? Anything at all that we can end this on?
Well, I guess one of the things that I'm probably most proud of is when we look at the Hall of Fame, of course, those are folks that have 35 years with us. And if we go back 35 years ago, there were 163 people, I believe, on the team at that time. And now there are 44 in the Hall of Fame. So that's over 25% of the folks that were here 35 years ago have spent more than 35 years with us. And that's a really, really good number. And that's not normal at all. And so to me, I'm just really proud of that and want to thank everyone for sticking with us.
and this brings up something you mentioned, watching people use the values and the mission, vision, values to grow and help the businesses grow. I don't think you maybe even see all the examples of that. So I was on the phone with a newer employee recently, and he said deciding to work for the company he's working for was the best decision that he's ever made. And so I don't think you even always get to see some of those examples of the way that the IFMC affects people's lives. So you're right on that it absolutely does. Thank you for your time today. Again, everybody, we will be back on November 17th. I know some of you will be in the woods, but we'll record this and get it out for everyone. Greg, thank you so much for your time. I know you can't reach that bell behind you, but we're going to pretend that you're going to end it by ringing that bell. So we'll see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everyone.